Hello, and welcome back to Jack's Coffee Break. We're talking about water today, and I'm gonna be real honest with you. This is going to be a tutorial, but it's not going to be comprehensive. I'm gonna start by giving you the basics of what water in a video game is. We're gonna talk about how Planet Zoo processes it, and then we're gonna start to look at what this can mean for your habitats. Now, unfortunately, my computer's in sort of a weird state as of the time that I record this. I have a whole 100 gigabytes to work with, and the average recording costs about 36 gigabytes. Somewhere between 12 and 36 is usually the average, but it can go up to 48. Videos are very heavy and very expensive on my processor right now, or my storage space, and unfortunately right now, until my computer is fully repaired, that's something that I'm going to have to keep in mind. So we're going to have to do this in multiple parts, but I suspect that that's probably going to be for the better because I would like to build some actual, aquatic habitats, with you. Actually show them and how we're putting them together and how we're doing all of the logic. And I really feel like that's going to be something that's better as its own section, like its own video, rather than excuse you, sir, rather than a piece of this video, because otherwise it's going to be an hour and a half, and we don't need that. These tutorials are already just so long as it is, and I'm not helping right now. So, what is water in a video game? This question is actually weirdly complicated. There are essentially phases in game development where the answer to what is water has changed over the years. The most basic version of water in a 3D game, especially one where you can interact with it and actually go underneath it, is that it's not actually a real object. So in video game design, there's a lot of trickery and wizardry that goes into creating the illusion of a real place. Water is one of those things. So you'll notice this as recently as Skyrim, but this was the mode for a long time. And I think that depending on the game that you're dealing with, these techniques are still used today too. Essentially, so we have this body of water right here, and we're actually going to use this one right here to better illustrate our purposes. So we have the ground right here, it's nice and flat, and then on top of that we have a hole that we've made and filled with water. And this is essentially, in most video games, a JPEG image or a PNG, more likely something like a PNG or a GIF or something like that. It will be a flat image with a texture placed on top of it. That texture may or may not have an animation. And it also has specific coding triggers. So we're going to do this in Explore mode, just that way you can get the idea. So when I'm just standing on top of the water, it's not a big deal, but the second that I go into the water, it causes this trigger. So if you watch very carefully, and maybe we can get it slowed down in post, there is just this brief moment where as we go into the water, maybe, this is really difficult. Hopefully something in there is useful for my editor. There's just this single brief moment where we're underneath, quote unquote, the water. You can see the flat JPEG image above us, or PNG, or whatever this file is that they're using in order to create this texture. And there's a brief moment where the code is not quite yet triggered, and things are kind of, there we go, we can glitch into it. You can see straight through, and the illusion's broken for just a moment. What's happening is that this has a trigger in it that creates a UI overlay. It's not real. It is simply part of your user interface, just like any of these buttons down here are, or any of these are up here. And so it projects a texture onto your screen like a filter. And that's essentially what's happening here too. It's exactly what's happening here. So we get this nice underwater view, and then when we go back above ground, we've got this nice animated texture. Well, it would be animated if I was playing. See, and this is the one for the calm water. Now this is how things have been done since the advent of video games. It's a really simple system. It's very lightweight on coding. It was not enough for Planet Zoo because of the way that the animals interact with the water, because of the fact that we need to have some way for the animals to float through, and we need to be able to calculate the amount of water that we actually have, because the animals need to know how much is in their habitats. So just doing a flat image on top of a piece of ground with a filter underneath it, and then some triggers to change your character's movement and animations and things like that was not going to be good enough. And so what we end up with is something called volumetric calculated water. And it does exactly what it says on the tin. It calculates the volume of water as if this were a 3D object. So it's sort of a pseudo 3D. It exists as a series of pictures and filters, but it also has dimension within the game that the computer is calculating off of, which is really cool. I mean, really, really cool that we've gotten to a point where we can do this. This is mandatory for things like your bears and your we don't have walruses, sea lions and things like that, to be able to figure out where they can actually swim in this space, because otherwise they're just gonna run a swimming animation until they pop up above the surface here, and then trigger whatever coding is packed into here, or until they run across the ground and they trigger whatever coding is preventing them from clipping into the ground. That's very technical and very complicated. And I do want to mention that I know this stuff based off of messing with the game. I don't work for Frontier. I have never worked for Frontier, and I am not affiliated with them. So take everything that I tell you with a grain of salt. This is my experience as a 20-year-long gamer with an obsession, not as somebody who has made this game. Cool? Cool. Okay. So let's talk about this thing. The barriers. So it's one thing to have a bit of water placed on level ground. It's a whole nother thing to be able to do this. This is another reason why we have the volume calculations. So essentially what the barrier does is it cuts off this area, and when we go to fill it, it changes the way that this area is calculated in the volume of water. Now what the game wants to have, and I say want because as the fact that we have a hedge holding back a lake will show, it doesn't really work in practice. What the game wants is for you to have these barriers as the way that you contain your animals. Now in modern Planet Zoo, we don't really do this. Or rather, a lot of builders don't do this. If you're really just interested in the management and you don't really want to build stuff, you know, you're fine to use these barriers. And if you like the aesthetic of them, you know, use them as well. They have their own set of mechanics that doesn't apply to anything else in the game. So for the most part, most of us use the null barriers and then we build our own out of construction pieces. I have an entire tutorial somewhere about custom barriers, how to build them, why you would build them, all that kind of stuff. It's somewhere. I don't know if it exists. I don't know if it's uploaded or smushed into something else. This has been a long month. So what the game wants is for you to use these barriers to contain your animals, and the barriers all have different properties. I have tutorials about barriers and custom barriers somewhere. Maybe they exist as part of a different video. Maybe they exist on the drive and I haven't uploaded them yet. I don't know. It's been a very long month. Anyway, most of the time we use these null barriers, and they're great, but they don't hold water. They don't. They literally do not hold water. They're see-through. And that's fine. But for the rest of the barriers, you know, if you want to use them, and for creating this thing right there, you have to use a barrier. Supposedly these all have different properties, right? So we have our resistance grades. That's going to be how easily an animal can break through them. This is something that you need to know because almost every single animal in the game is fine with this regular grade 3 glass barrier, except for the polar bear, who needs the thick glass resistance grade 4. And he's the only animal that I can remember that actually needs the thick glass. Otherwise, it's fine. Now you'll also notice that they also have other things on here like opaque. This means that the guests can't see through it. Moderate dilapidation. This means how quickly they break down. Not climbable. Interacts with the water climbing. And then this last tag here, watertight and not watertight. Now I tested this, and you'll notice that I'm using a not watertight barrier like it's a watertight barrier. So I don't know if it's because I'm in Sandbox. I don't know if this is a glitch. I don't know what's happening here. But for some reason, this watertight or not watertight tag, for me, means nothing. Your mileage is going to vary. Maybe it's an issue with the update. Maybe it's something on my end, some setting I changed. Test it out for yourself. But yeah, so you can sometimes get weird stuff like this. Next, what are some of the things that we can do to customize water? Quite a lot, actually. So we have our cleanliness, our temperature, our water area, and the water depth. And then we have this customize tab. So let's work our way through this page. We also have the connected objects. This doesn't matter. Don't worry about this. Let's look at this page here. So cleanliness. Your water's cleanliness is only going to go down if it is connected to a habitat, a functional habitat, not a barrier. It has to be a functional habitat. And moreover, it doesn't matter if there is actually an animal in the habitat, the water will get dirty. And it gets dirty over a set period of time. There's no amount of like, the animal pooped in it and now it's going to get dirty faster. It doesn't really work like that. So this means that if you don't want to deal with water temperature cleaners, if you don't want to deal with water cleaners, and just don't put your water in a habitat. But of course, that's not going to be possible for what we're going to do. So the other thing that you can do if you're low on cash or you're just starting off, it is completely acceptable to go through here, clean it, or remove the water and then replace it. Your animals are going to get flung back to the front of the entrance, but I mean, it's fine. It's really not that big of a deal. Eventually, though, you do want to invest in a water cleaner. Temperature. In order to regulate water temperature, you need one of these, this water temperature regulator, which is currently unpowered. I'm going to put down a power source because there are some properties that you need to see about it. So the water temperature regulator can go as hot as 113 degrees and as cold as 34. Obviously, it can't go any lower than that or else the water would freeze. Likewise, it has a range, so you can set it to be 1, which is useless, or 60, which is enormous, or anything in between, really. So let's say that I really wanted it to cover, I don't know, that body of water, but not that body of water, and we've got this really tight clearance right here. You can set that. See, it's just barely overlapping, and that's good enough. But it's not overlapping with this one, so this is not going to get regulated. So let's set it to like 61. We're here in temperatures. So as this continues, yeah, see it's changing color. So you can use your water temperature regulator to make water cold or to make it hot, and this can be really nice depending on what kind of environment you have. And it can also be really cool to use to make things like hot springs, which the macaques and the capybaras really like. And we will do capybara and macaque hot springs habitats to show off because they're super cool, but we're not going to do that today. So going back into our customization, if you wanted to do this now, or if you just want to play with it, this is the tab for you. So between your temperature regulator, set that all the way to hot, and then with your different customization features over here, you can create hot springs. So the default is clean water, and you can use the natural color, which is always this. It always looks like this, no matter where you are. It doesn't matter what temperature, what kind of biome you're in, it doesn't matter. It looks like this. But you can also set it to have custom. So here's some dirty water, here's some Amazon water, here's some azure water, in case you want it to be cyan blue. A little while ago, I did that community post about the pink water. The real-life, actual pink water. In case you ever wanted, your zoo to be covered in a cosmic cow, there's a natural precedent for that. So that's an option. Let's go ahead and take this to clean water. And let's say that I don't like any of the presets. Well, I have these little colored buttons. So I can make it yellow or purple, or let's say that I just want it to be a different blue. Yeah, so I could set it something like that. Maybe decrease the richness a little bit. Maybe I want it to be a little bit more blue-green. If I can. Yeah, maybe I want something like that. And then the mist color. So we'll deal with that in a second. Next bar right here is transparency. If you set it to 0, it is a brick. If you set it to 2, it might as well not exist. crystal clear, super clean water. And of course, the color that you set your water to also affects the quality of the transparency. So anything on the higher white spectrum is going to be just a little bit more opaque than if you set it to like black. So again, something to keep in mind. Bubbles. Let's go ahead and hit play. And now, underneath the water, we will have bubbles. How bubbly you want it to be just depends. As long as this isn't 0, you're going to get some bubbles. Lastly, mist. So let's go ahead and set this to 1, and we're going to start getting mist rising up nice and pretty. So again, as long as this isn't set to 0, you're going to get mist. But you can also change the color of that mist. So let's say that I want a horror vibe. There we go. Now I've got some blue water and some red mist, and what is even happening here? So those are the different ways that you can customize colors. Alright. Now, let's talk about building habitats with water viewing. There are a few things that you need to know. Building habitats involving water is a whole thing. And like I said, we're probably going to need to do multiple tutorials over the course of time to really explain this. So I'm going to give you the short and the sweet of how I start to build a habitat with underwater viewing. Cool? Okay. Alright. Let's start with our barriers. We have this lovely shape here. I built this to show off all of the different ways that we can manage water in our habitat. But in order to get the water in, we need to put down a barrier. I am going to use this grade 3 regular old class. Next thing I'm going to do is we have our different height modes over here at the bottom. We have the undulating, we've got the flat top, and we've got the flat top editable bottom. If you are working with water, you want flat top editable bottom. All of the rest of these are not going to give you the same utility that this one does. You really need to hit this button for it to work. Just across the board, regardless of what you're going to do. So next, let's go ahead and start putting down our outline. You'll notice that I am now kind of clipping through the world here. You want this. This is exactly what you want. Okay, so we've now defined the shape of the habitat. Our barriers are not hitting the flat plane up here, and we will need to deal with that. First, let's talk about habitat gates. So right now, as there's no water, it is perfectly acceptable to put a habitat gate right here. However, any attempt to put water down is going to say obstructed. And that is because a habitat gate absolutely cannot be underwater. So this, it matters for a lot of your design choices and the way that you lay out your habitats. But the other place where this matters is if you choose to mod your game. Fully aquatic mods exist. There's a lot of fish and whales and goodness knows what else. But they're fully aquatic. Unfortunately, what the game requires is that, let's go ahead and put down another door right here so I can show you. So the game requires that there be some amount of flat land in front of this door. If I hit push, this space has to be flat in order for this object to function. Now we can fill the rest of it with water, that's fine. But this does need to be flat in order for this to work. So no matter what, you're going to have some percentage of land, regardless of whether or not you have a fully aquatic creature installed or not. However, for the rest of us who play a base game and don't have any modded creatures, this is something to remember for your designs, but it's probably not going to mess too much with anything else in the game. So we can't have our door be right here. It seems convenient. It would be really nice if we could have a door here and then they could just go scuba diving and then just clean this out. Unfortunately, that's not how anything works in this game. So let's go ahead, remove this door, And really the best place for us to have a habitat gate is right up here. So now we need to get this barrier up here. How are we going to do that? So I'm going to go through and I'm going to delete these 3 pieces right here. And there's going to be these gaps. It's fine. This is where I want to turn off flat top, editable bottom, and go to undulating. So this is now going to clip through the world, and it's going to land me up here, and then I'm going to place another piece, I don't know, like right here, and then I'm going to snap through here. The reason why this has worked is because this angle right here is sloped, and I'm not trying to get a barrier off a convex ledge. It's just clipping through the world to land up here. So on the other hand, let's say that I wanted my barrier here and I wanted it to go down here. It can't because there is some convexity. It curves inward, so there's nothing for it to grab onto. It has to be concave to function. So not working, not working, not working, right there. Right there it works. That's got the right amount of slope to it. So that's something else to remember about your barriers. Let's go ahead and put down our door. And you'll notice that the door is clipping to the bottom of the barrier. This is important. So, for example, if we wanted to have our glass barrier... So let's say that we wanted it to clip through the world right here, and then we wanted to just pull this up. And then put our barrier door right there. It's just not going to work. So now this is all functional. However, when I go to put my water in, I want the water line to be more up here. It says it's obstructed, and the problem is that we haven't adequately contained the water. So I can put some down over here, but I can't put it any higher. So this is where having flat top, editable bottom comes into play. First things first, we're going to pull this up. Now we'll need to smooth this bit over, but that's okay. Next thing. In past versions of the game, holding down this and dragging has caused it to shoot to the world floor. Apparently they fixed it, or I'm having good luck today, which I'm very happy with. So you're going to pull it down using the editable bottom tool, this one right here, so that way it's clipping into the floor. And for some reason, it helps with anchoring the water volume. I don't know why, but it helps. And it also does something else. So let's say that we did want our water to only be here on this very bottom layer, right? Well, a barrier needs to be 1 meter tall. If we put our water any shallower, say for example we had ground that came up to like right here and then water, but we wanted like an infinity pool style, we would need to sink this into the ground. So now, to create that infinity pool thing, I can just slide this and tuck it right there. So now we've got our kind of infinity pool style lip right here. Looks really good. Problem is, if I go into here and I try to remove the water, do some edits to the terrain, and then try and put it back in, it's not going to work. So water needs at least 1 or 2, I think it's 2 meters, but it's 1 or 2 meters above the edge of the water in order to allow for calculation. So, yeah. We now have all of this done through here. I'm going to do some quick terrain edits just to show you some things real quick. So, we've got our terrain edits done. This will make sense in a moment. However, let's say that I wanted to edit the terrain over here while the water is placed. Well, unfortunately, that's not going to work. There is a certain area of denial zone that cannot be toggled once a water volume is placed. In order to redo any of your terrain, you have to get rid of the water. And this can cause a lot of problems depending on the task that you're doing. For example, if you're doing a water entrance and you want to set your path or your spawner or whatever directly on top of the water, you have to do all of your terrain edits first, and then you place your water, and then you place your pathing. It's important that you do it in this order, because if you remove the water while the pathing still exists and then try to add it back in, there is an area of denial around the pathing where the water simply will not place. It's important that you do it in order. So we're going to do a few styles with our water over here just to show off what you can do. Now that we have everything nice and tall, let's go ahead and fix this because it looks terribad. Let's go ahead and place our water. There we are. Nice, beautiful, flooded habitat. Lots of fun geometry, lots of cool stuff going on here. Now this space down here, we could use this as a den. We can also flood it. Make something that looks like that. Let me just increase the opacity real quick. It just really doesn't want to show, but it's there. It's definitely there. So you can create underwater caves for your creatures to swim through. You can create tunnels for them to swim through. You can separate your water volumes and then connect them back together and do all kinds of cool stuff. All that matters is that when you place down your water, you have enough barrier at the top that you can actually place it down. But let's say that I do want that infinity pool style, right? So under the best circumstances, what's going to happen is I'm going to go and circle the entire thing, and then I'm going to pull down this one barrier, and oh, there's the red. There's the red. So essentially what is happening here is, back when we were talking about calculating of the water volumes and your anchor points, this is one of the things that is going to come up. In the absence of terrain, the game chooses a point on the barrier as sort of a calculation point. It's because the water is volumetric, but it's not an organic shape. It's cubic. It's angular, and it wants to tie to specific angle points. In fact, you can even tell, because right here, this is not subdivided. This is just a little corner of the water. It's just a brick where it's glitched. And this guideline is informed by the world grid. So we talked about the world grid before. One of our very first tutorials, we talked about all of the different tools and how to use them for building. And one of the things that we talked about in that tutorial is the world grid. So you can see that we have this little ridge line through here. So this is all 1 meter. So from here to here, that is a 1 meter chunk. Likewise over here, we have these seams that run vertical and then horizontal as well. You can kind of tell where it's trying to calculate angles and subdivide. This universal grid is tied to the map. It can't be changed, it can't be altered, and even if you were to move your entrance, you can always tell based off of the world border. Well, water is also calculated off of the universal grid as well, and it wants to be tethered to this. So when, and I do mean when, you run into this problem, there's really no fast way to handle this. The best way to do it is to go in, select every single panel, bring it down to an infinity point, and eventually you will find the one piece that doesn't want to move. So I'm going to find that piece and we'll be back. So we are back, and having adjusted all of these pieces that are actually attached to the water, we have found our bits that don't like us, that are not behaving. These are functioning as subdivision anchor points. So much like over here when we did our texturing for the ground, and it's trying to like create these awkward little angles so that way it's not just a jagged thing. It's finding these places where it can subdivide and create an angle. The water's doing this too. But if the water is preventing the terrain from being manipulated, it's a pretty good indication that the water needs to be stable once it's already calculated. It will not recalculate and it will not reshuffle. And it's because of these anchor points. So anytime that the water gets subdivided, we're getting these little anchor points and it's saying, no, absolutely not, please don't do this to me. How do we deal with that? Well, we're gonna have to move our barriers a bit, and we're gonna have to do a lot of finagling. See how this one is absolutely fine, but this one isn't? These 3 pieces don't want to be moved, but then these do. This one is unhappy, but these 2 at the side are not. It's a whole thing. So, we're going to start by undoing all of this, and I'm going to mark these pieces. See, I can't even move them. And I can't change any colors. So I'm going to grab a construction piece out, just that way I can mark them for myself. I'm going to grab this bauble. So these are my 4 panels that, yeah, we're just going to have to fix. Of course, all of that's going to get undone. We'll get there. Listen, we'll get there. I'll see you in a minute. Alright, the water is removed. The panels are marked. So now, we need to get these to no longer be anchor points, so that way we can actually move them around. So it's not necessarily that the water has to anchor to a barrier. It's going to if it can, but it doesn't have to. So, how do we find the points where these are no longer going to be treated as firm anchors? Well, first way is to mess around and find out. Just move these around randomly and just hope that you find it. However, in another project that I've been working on, I found a slightly better method. So the other way that I found to do this, sorry, had a brief lunch break. The other way that I found to do this is to dig a hole, flatten it out, and find those world lines. So you'll see almost immediately that these 3 panels right here, the ones that were giving us trouble, are just off of this world line. So let's go ahead and take these. I'm just going to grab this little edge right here, and I'm going to stick them back onto the world line edge. There's that one. Now this one over here is a little bit more confusing, but it is on the grid. So let's go ahead and drag our flattened terrain over here. Shrink this a little bit. And right about here is where that line is. So we're going to go ahead and grab this little pole right here, and I'm going to move it forward to about like right there, and this one to like right here. So it's on the world line, at least more than before. We're not subdividing anything. After that, let's go ahead and heal our terrain, and let's go ahead and test our water volume again. Yep, and all of these work. So now, in theory, I should be able to circle the entire thing. And hopefully, unless something else messed up, we should be able to drag, yeah, we can drag this all down and create our infinity pool. And that's that! So now we have this absolutely beautiful habitat. We have really amazing water to go along with it. We have tons of viewing space. We've got a little cave for them to swim into. The walls for our cave are even covered. I'm not entirely sure why we're having this visual issue where it doesn't appear like there's any water, despite the fact that I've set it to opaque. I don't know what that's about. Not really worried about it. Yeah, see, if we have this line, it doesn't appear. So we may be able to trick it. No, no we can't. So again, I don't really know why we're having that visual issue. But here's something interesting. We're getting another volume placement line. So that's interesting. So again, water calculation is really strange. It's very nice, it's very handy, you can do some super cool things with it, but you're always gonna run into these weird little like, what is happening here kind of things with it, because of the fact that it has to calculate a 3D volume out of essentially boxes and angles. So hopefully though, this at least gives you kind of a primer of like what you can do, what you can't do, how to fix some of the issues that you do run into, you know? For example, if we have another issue where, you know, we subtract this calm water, we do some terrain edits. Can't stick it right there, can do it right there, because we gotta have this 1 meter block. So I'm just gonna fix that by undoing, and it doesn't register. Undoing when you're working with water is very useful. Instead of like going in and trying to replace something, just hit Control Z and it fixes things a lot better, especially if you didn't mean to do something. So that's the primer as best as I can give it. We will do some actual like building some habitats, just not right now. Just I gotta get my computer sorted, but when that happens, we'll do some cool stuff. You know, we'll build a capybara habitat with a hot tub, and we'll do some waterfalls, and I don't know, maybe like a sea lion habitat or something like that. I don't know. We'll do some cool things. Anyway, hope this has been useful to you. Good luck, and happy building.